In this video, we break down what's happening with the TikTok ban and its reinstatement, and we'll also take a look at the direction things seem to be going in now. Hello, welcome to the Carl Last Here podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man who knows that in the end, it's all about guns and roses. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to lay down some blueprints here for us today?
Yeah, man. You're just making me feel old because I think of Axl Rose and Slash with a guitar. That tells me I still remember the 1980s, which you're reminding me that I'm not a young man anymore.
So, it's a long way from that.
Thank you, sir, for that.
Yeah, long way from that.
I guess I'm wearing the right shirt for that today.
Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, we ask that you subscribe and like the show on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. And we're recording on January 28th, 2025. And in the last week or so, last 10 days or so, we've seen TikTok go dark in the US for a few hours and then get revived, at least for existing users. Now, the ban was due to a law that required TikTok to be sold from the Chinese parent company, ByteDance, to a U.S.-based company in order to continue operating in the U.S., and that had to be in order to continue operating in the U.S. past January 19th, 2025. Since no sale occurred, the app was supposed to go dark. But then the revival happened as a result of an executive order from the president that basically said that the federal government was not going to enforce that law temporarily. But the law remains on the books. So, Tunde, just to get us started, what were your thoughts on the decision to not enforce the ban and the legal limbo we kind of stand in now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, man. And I think the way you wound it up is great because I think the first concern is, like you said, the legal limbo. That legislation was passed last year by the Congress, signed into law by the president at the time. And now we have an incoming president that is basically made an executive order to tell companies, hey, you don't have to abide by that law that Congress just passed last year. Yeah. And so my concern...
this isn't some law from 100 years ago that we're like, nobody's really thought about this for a long time. Yeah.
Well, my concern is that, this is a one-off so far, right? So let's not get too... I'm not trying to make this into something that's way bigger than it is right now. But if we see this happen more often, right? We're in the first week of the administration. So if we see this happen more often over the next 4 years... one of my main concerns would be that over a long period of time, slowly this would be the kind of death by a thousand cuts kind of our just legal and enforcement mechanisms in the United States.
Just real quick, let me jump in because that brings something to mind. It's very interesting because you're like, so are we going to go into this situation where like when each administration comes in, they just give us a list of the laws they're not going to enforce anymore?
Yeah.
That's not really what they're supposed to be doing there.
But on a serious note, think about what this means. You have companies like Apple, right, that have, I think the number I saw recently was 170 million people.
Well, that's across total TikTok users in the U.S. But Apple and everybody.
Okay, so that's the total. So a big chunk of them come through Apple, people with that iPhone, because that's one of the major, the providers of phones.
And the rest would be Samsung or not Samsung, but excuse me, the Google through the Android.
Yeah, with the Android phones and all that. So the thing is that what I read was that the fines from the legislation last year can reach up to $5,000 per person who accesses TikTok from one of these companies' platforms, right? Google or
updates Apple. It or anything like that.
So, and the number that I saw in the article was that would be, 170 million times the 5,000, be around 865 billion in total fines if everybody, if they really applied it to everybody and all that. So clearly that seems even unreasonable for companies as large as Apple and Google. But even
on that point, Apple and Google have not reinstated "quote unquote" TikTok. Part of the legal limbo we're in now is that while Oracle and
let's save that actually for the explanation of the follow up because
let me get in here too.
That's all I wanted to say though was that let's assume like just 10% of that $800 billion was actually applied as a fine because people were using it. That's still a lot for these industries. So that's where I was going to your point was that Apple and Google have not reinstated the ability for people to download TikTok since it went dark on January, I think it was 18th or something like that, or just recently, in this recent few weeks. So That's what I'm saying is that one of the, and I think this is, and you've told me this, that we need to let this play out, right? I think Americans underappreciate the fact that the world capital is comfortable coming here because traditionally American politicians and leaders haven't behaved like this. Whereas because business likes certainty, markets like certainty, large corporations like to be able to forecast a few years out with some certainty. So to have a law passed like the one that was passed last year that could have these fines that are in the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars range, which is important for a company to be able to forecast and all that. And then to have a new administration, like you said, come in and just say, wheels up on that one. You guys can do what you want. But then, like you're saying, the law is still on the books.
Yeah.
So my concern, if I'm Apple or Amazon, looking at the way that kind of the way of being of this type of leadership that we've had come in, which seems can become adversarial and all that kind of stuff, I'd be concerned if I'm Apple or Google that could the rug be pulled from me 6 or 12 months from now in the event that this administration becomes unhappy with me? Would they then say, hey, that executive order we did in January, you know what, now we'll change our mind on that. We're going to actually apply those laws from last year. Now you got all these people on your platform. Haha, here's a way to punish you for whatever you didn't like somewhere else.
I mean, to me, that's the biggest takeaway here is this is kind of ruling by fiat, like by just we're just going to give orders. Executive orders is not the way our government's supposed to run. And the reason for that is because the law is supposed to be a little more deliberate and predictable. And so in this instance, there's a law that, again, debated through Congress, through all these committees, and that it's supposed to be a deliberative process. It's supposed to be something that takes a while, and you got to really mean it, so to speak. And once it's on the books, it's hard to take off the books. And so that's the setup of our system. Just basically, Congress makes the laws, courts interpret the laws, executive branch, whether that be the president and all the, DOJ and all that, enforces the laws. That's the separation of powers. And so while this could be, it's not plainly illegal for the president to do this, so to speak, because as the enforcing of the laws, part of the thing is you get to decide how vigorously you're going to enforce each law. And so him coming out and saying, hey, for 75 days, I'm not going to enforce this law, or for the president to say that, and I'm not going to have the Department of Justice and all that go after people for this. It's one that's outside of like that. That's the law is on the books. The law has been made. The court has interpreted the law and found it to be constitutional. So that's all happened. And so now we're just looking at the executive branch. And so the executive branch, this is something that creates a level of unpredictability that we're not supposed to have in our system. It's supposed to be once the law goes through all that stuff, it's supposed to be something that the president and the executive branch enforces. So what this creates, like you kind of alluded to, was this idea of manipulation and trading favors amongst the president. Like, well, hey, this law is on the books, but if you guys do this for me or you guys do that for me, then I won't enforce that law against you or against, because right now it's like, okay, well, I won't enforce it against anybody. But what happens then when it's like, okay, well, I won't enforce it against this person and this person and this person, but I will enforce it against everybody else. Like you go down a slippery slope here as far as, okay, well, now we're starting to picking and choosing. And we see this, we've seen this in various settings when people talk about how the Justice Department or in either federally or in states have prosecuted drug crimes, things like that. People get favored status and the law doesn't apply to them the same. So to me, I'm concerned about it from that standpoint. Like if we don't want to do the TikTok ban anymore, then let's pass another law. Let's go through that process. And if we are going to do the TikTok ban, then let's do the TikTok ban. But this kind of limbo thing, and we're going to see how this plays out. We are going to start doing favored nation type of thing where we're going to certain people. We've seen reports now that, the president may want certain people to buy this and not just anybody with the money, but whoever, like, oh, well, this is my friend. I want my friend to buy this, and then we can have that. So we go into this place, man, where, we're getting further and further from rule by, like a constitution and more by just the whims of the presidential office. And that's,
now you said it, man, rule by decree. That's what you said. And I think that's what this type of, at least the spirit and sentiment of the type of leadership
it sounds a lot like that.
It seems like they prefer to be able to rule by decree than, like you just said, have the deliberative bodies that were designed, by the founders of this country in the Constitution, particularly the Congress, the U.S. Congress made up of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, deliberating to, reach a compromise based on the will of the people and all the stuff that we're supposed to hold dear in this country. So it's interesting. One of the things before we jump to kind of the next phase of the conversation that I want to just piggyback on is, I appreciate the way you bring that out, especially for the audience. James is an attorney, so there's a lot of knowledge and history on the way this legal system is actually and legislative process is supposed to be carried out. But then there's the other part of the conversation that is, I think, just adjacent to everything we're talking about, which is, again, and this isn't like a law or a rule, but I think this is more like norms and the kind of soft underbelly of the democracy that we've learned is so valuable, but it's not something that is really like a rule of law type of thing. It's just like I said earlier, like the way this all looks, right? And the communication from our leadership, and now this would be successive administration, I'm saying, to the public. And it's like, so which one is it, right? Like, is this thing so like dangerous that it's, the Chinese are spying on us and we got to be so scared and all this? Or is this thing like a thing for our kids to be on? Like, my point is, because you made the
football. Is this something that we're trying to extract concessions? Is this a negotiating ploy? Like,
that's what I mean. Like, it's becoming more obvious that this is the way this is being used because, like you said, if there's 170 million Americans on this platform, that's more than 50% of this country, clearly. Yeah. Which means if it is a national security risk and all the espionage stuff with the Chinese, it seems pretty serious, right? Like, why are we now? It's been saying about it. Trump first brought this up in his first term. It's 2025 now. That would have been somewhere between 2017 and 2020. So if it's that much of a national security risk, why we got now the third administration dealing with it and it wasn't dealt with pretty quickly? And then we have the real things that are well documented that people can go look up, which is the direction of this leader and how he's dealt with it. So he came up with the idea to ban it first, but then about a year ago when it was campaign time and there was a billionaire hedge fund owner that had $30 billion worth of ByteDance stock, which is the parent company of TikTok. Apparently, when he got friendly to the candidate who's now the president and said, hey, man, if you leave this thing alone and stop talking like this, I'll give you some money for your campaign. All of a sudden, the direction of the rhetoric changes into, maybe we can keep this thing. But like you said, but it's got to be sold to one of my buddies. So it becomes like this. That's what I mean. Like, this is fine to me. This is where we're going. And this is what America voted for. But it's just, I think we need to be prepared as Americans that the business community, the international community of capital, those kind of things, if this continues, this type of picking winners and losers by the political class, which has not happened in American history in a public way. I'm not saying behind the scenes there weren't some picking winners and losers.
Yeah, but like it used to be like they had to go to smoke-filled rooms.
Yeah,
like they had to do that. Now they do it on the internet. They do. Oh yeah, this is like they don't even go to the smoke-filled rooms anymore.
I'm laughing because you're right. You're about to make me wish for the days of smoke-filled rooms and make decisions behind the scenes where none of us could see. I'm like, man, this stuff looks sloppy. You know what I mean? Like,
is this what y'all were doing in those smoke-filled rooms?
Hey, man, I got these two guys over here. They need to buy this Chinese company. I'm thinking, like, what's BMW and Mercedes going to say eventually when it's like, hey, we don't like the way you guys are making cars, man. Hey, my buddy over here at the country club, he's going to buy Mercedes, okay? You can't sell any cars in America unless this guy gets 30%.
Well, I mean, as cars get all these chips and cameras in them, I mean, arguably these laws are going to start applying to them as well. You know, to say, hey, your car spies on you too. You know, well, it will at a certain point. So
I never thought of this until we're joking.
There's one other thing, though.
Let me just say this joke, and then we'll move on. That honestly, I never thought of this until we're joking now. This could be the slippery slope into like doing what they did in Cuba or what they do in China, like a state-owned company, where eventually it's not sell it to my friend, but it's like, hey, we just need this stuff. You know, we're going to own it as the U.S.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be the U.S. that gets the benefit of that. It's going to be some person at the head in the government of the U.S. that's like, no, I'll just control it, which will be, you know, that goes into a lot of dark places. But
all right,
the other
so maybe I'll go work for the government now.
Huh?
Maybe I'll just go work for the government. It seems like that's going to be pretty lucrative.
I don't know, man. You got to be ideologically aligned now to work for the government.
Well, I bought into this whole small business ownership thing over the last like 30 years. So now maybe I'll just buy into to go and work for the government to be rich. So anyway, keep going. Sorry.
The other piece, though, that I just think needs to be emphasized here is that when we're looking at TikTok, and we're saying, okay, yeah, a lot of people were concerned. A lot of people don't care, like, oh yeah, national security, your data, da 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 da. And so when TikTok was quote unquote saved, there were cheers, from the public and so forth. But it's like, again, we were talking about before how it was saved. It was saved by decree, by fiat, by the ruler says you are okay to continue on, and then some of the companies go with it and say, hey, okay, yeah, Oracle says, okay, yeah, we'll route traffic with TikTok still. As we kind of alluded to earlier, Apple, Google have said, no, we're not going to be involved in this. You can't download it from our app stores. You can't update the app. So the app is, potential security vulnerabilities or can get exploited, can't get updated. So we took something that the government told us was unsafe already and have made it more unsafe now because it can't be updated, can't be patched with security fixes, anything like that. So all of that being said, the larger question that this starts to bring into is, okay, well now, so we already have, when we saw in the inauguration and so forth, it seems like social media in general has become closer and closer with our certain parts of our government, whether it be executive branch, the president and so forth, whether it be Mark Zuckerberg, who controls Facebook, Instagram. You have Elon Musk controlling Twitter, X. And now TikTok is seemingly saying, hey, let's funnel this to someone else who's friendly to us. Should we be concerned at all that that social media, which is such a where most people get their news and is as demonstrated to be able to persuade people, put people in these algorithmically created worlds and information bubbles that they have a certain view of the world and the facts what's happening. Should we be concerned, or how concerned should we be, I should say, that now we're actually going to start making laws to force sales of social media companies, and then as a part of that sale, we're going to direct it to people who may be friendly to us, or, and I'm not saying we as Americans, I'm saying we as a certain constituency or a certain person even.
Oh, so you mean like selling it to billionaires from other countries who come in our country, make a lot of money, but disrupt our cultural narrative?
So, apparently I got no gripes politics all over the world too.
Hey, it's like I got no gripes with these non-Americans coming in messing up our country. but no, I think it's an interesting point, James, because I think it as you're talking, it's like I'm thinking, okay, so what's the why here? Why is there so much interest from this billionaire class and these political leaders to, I would use the term, control what social media companies are doing and how information flows on their platforms? So that's my first question. That's kind of the why.
We all be asking right there.
Yep. Yeah. And here's the thing where I think, again, people have talked about this horseshoe theory when it comes to extremes. I think there's actually if you think of the Venn diagram, there's a healthy, moderate group of people on the left and right that I think have a healthy skepticism of too much concentrated power in the hands of, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the show, whether it's government or corporations. And I think that would be my concern that I would share with anyone within the middle of that Venn diagram, because that's why it doesn't matter the political ideology, but the idea of having a healthy skepticism about power and authority. And I think it's a very good point you bring up, because what social media has allowed with disseminating misinformation and this kind of fire hose of falsehoods, ideas, and the ability now for bots and AI, like non-human actors, to actually be out there continuing to fan the flames and pour gasoline on cultural fires. What we've really seen is, the ability, it's almost like an ongoing experiment that we are we're the petri dish, us as the consumer, we're the test subjects, where it's like these little levers can be pulled and we respond and behave, meaning en masse as populations, a certain way. Yeah. And so that's where I think this is very interesting, where I have a healthy skepticism. And I think this is the problem with social media too. Social media can take what most people would consider a healthy skepticism about a topic and accelerate that into conspiracy very quickly. And we've seen this from the Haitians eating pets to the stuff about FEMA last year with the hurricanes, to the LA fires now.
To the genocide in Myanmar, last decade, it takes, relatively, tame positions and mindsets and can amplify them into something where people start killing people, in mass. No, I mean,
you're right.
I'll tell you, man, I think that what we are seeing here is the result of Musk buying Twitter. And what that demonstrated to that billionaire class is that this is the way of the future, so to speak. Hey, if we can own these social media, if we can own these social media companies, then we can do whatever we want from the population standpoint, because we can use the algorithms to just control essentially the narrative that's happening in large swaths of the population. And so because of that, I think that what we're seeing now with TikTok is the effort is to get that into quote unquote friendly hands in the same way that Twitter is in friendly hands. The irony is that I don't know that this was particularly like the full extent of this was known when Musk bought Twitter, but we've even seen Zuckerberg actually turn his direction and attention to be more like Musk at this juncture. And so I think this has been seen. Social media basically is viewed, I believe, by this oligarch class, this ultra wealth class, as a means of population control. So if we control the social media, if we can decide what part of the algorithms to turn up, which part to turn down, and so forth, what things people see. We already have reports we had reports last year of Facebook and Instagram blocking negative stories of candidate Trump at the time. We have reports now, TikTok, people saying their algorithm changed. You were telling me, about how Facebook now makes you follow certain people or something like that. And so I think that they have realized that control of social media allows complete control of large parts of the population. And so therefore we're seeing that. And that's what's about to play out right now is the objective being we're going to control population and be able to do whatever we want, because using these algorithms, we don't have to sit there and work hard every day to do this like you would from a propaganda standpoint. We can just control, turn the dials every now and again, and the population will take care of themselves.
Well, I think there's actually some interesting history. If you look at, for people, take people who want to look this up because it's a separate show. I'm not going to get into it in detail, but look up the history of the Nazi Party and radios in Germany in the 1930s, because radios were very expensive at the time. Most Germans did not have them. The Nazis instituted a program in conjunction with certain radio manufacturers in Germany to manufacture a very cheap radio. They disseminated it to the mass population, but it only tuned to one station, which was a station ran by the Nazis. Mm-hmm. So that's how a society, or not the only thing, but one example of how a society was changed so rapidly because of control of information by the central authority.
And a new media, basically a new form of media, and an establishment recognizing the power in that and saying, hey, if we can with much less effort than it might take to pamphlet people, we can control large numbers of people. And that's not, I don't think the point of this is to say that the people who are doing this are Nazis necessarily. Like, whether they are or not is irrelevant. It's just seeing this trend and being able to identify this trend of, hey, this is a more effective and efficient means of population control.
Yeah, well, though they might not be Nazis, but one of them did make a fun gesture that reminded us of.
Hey, man,
other gestures we've seen in the past.
Didn't you see? The social media said that didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I can't believe the media said that didn't happen. So I mean, I don't know how.
I'm not going to believe my lying eyes, but that's a whole other topic. But so here's the thing. You're right, and that's why the example you give about Facebook was actually my wife, who this week told me that the presidential account, the president's Facebook account was forced on her, that she was, she all of a sudden was following it. She decided to unfollow it because, she's not political. And then it was put on her again. Like, the company forced her to follow it again. And then she unfollowed it again, and they finally left her alone. So that's the thing, James. And I think you're right. Like, this isn't about, and that's what I mean, like, this is tough, right? I've got a healthy skepticism of this. I'm trying to stop myself from going into full conspiracy boat, which could be pretty easy because it's easy to scare myself, right? Like, I kind of, it's kind of comforting to get all scared and act like I'm going to go start finding out all the stuff about the guys in the smoke-filled rooms. I guess they make it a lot easier for us now because they just announce it in public what they do. But no. So the what I was going to say though is that the part that I have the healthy skepticism and not conspiracy on is that's why I love history. Look at the newspapers with the Gettys or the Hearsts and all that stuff. Look at, like we talked about in other shows, about Henry Ford owning the Dearborn Press and having a whole series of publications called the International Jew in the 1920s, which helped to lead to this bigger feeling of anti-Semitism, both domestically and in Europe as well. So the idea of wealthy people wanting to control information because they feel, especially the Gilded Age type of folks like Henry Ford or today a Jeff Bezos, for example, with Washington Post, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that if a human being literally gets to the mountaintop kind of in a capitalist system, they're going to feel that they are smarter than a lot of people and they did something right and they probably got some way to fix society. So sometimes you have people like a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett that do it in their philanthropic ways. And there's a conspiracy theories about guys like that. Other times you got guys like Henry Ford or those guys who think of things like eugenics, that's their ideology that they think is so smart. And they're going to push that with their control of information. So that's what I'm saying, James, is that this seems to be, if you look at it historically, the healthy skepticism side of me says, okay, probably since people were putting cuneiform into clay tablets, the ruler of that society was trying to own whoever was, in charge of the clay tablets. But the part to me that feels like it could go into a little bit more hyperbolic conspiracy concerns would be looking at specifically someone like Elon Musk that's now using his influence with these platforms to influence the politics of other nations like Germany and England. So that's like,
in addition to our politics.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like, all right, now you're looking like a Bond villain. Like you're just trying to disrupt everybody with this stuff. So that's to me like maybe we're too early in it. I want to maintain the healthy skepticism side, but I feel like I'm watching some things that could lead me into conspiratorial theory pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of for your own sanity, is to try to keep the healthy sanity, the healthy skepticism.
I'm trying not to go
without
crazy.
Going full blown and so forth. I think that like this is something our founding fathers thought about, though. I mean, this is why you have independent press and the press being protected. And the concern here is that it's not necessarily by laws that are being passed by the government that the press is becoming less independent. And social media is the press, like there's no two ways about it, particularly the way that posts and so forth are algorithmically curated. Like they are deciding what you see, how often you see it, and when you see it. It's not just, oh, this was posted at this time, so you see it, and anything like it's just your friends that you see. Like, no, it's done algorithmically, but it's done with intentionality, and it's taking you places, whether that's designed to maximize quote unquote engagement or for other purposes. So the other thing, though, I think that part of the why on why powerful interests have liked to monopolize media sources is because when you get into these Gilded Age type of societies where the vast majority of the spoils and the resources in a society are not controlled or owned or accessible to members of the public, but they're all controlled, owned, and accessible by just this small number of people, is that becomes a really hard life for 99.9% of the people, or 95% of the people, whatever it is. So a very overwhelming majority of the people, it's a very hard life for them because, again, the spoils of the society being generated by the society aren't being distributed in any way, in any kind of intentional way. Which again that's the inverse of a New Deal type of society that the United States had in the mid 1900s, when a lot of people look and say, "Oh, this was a golden age of the United States." Then you had that time period, but they don't think about the economic.
There's even people that say "Make America Great Again," thinking about that period, right?
Yeah, but they don't think about the economic structure that was in place.
That's what I mean. But that economic structure is what they opine to, but they don't realize.
The mechanics of that is something that's kind of not thought of in that sense, but. The need or the benefit of controlling the media and the information flows in that type of situation is the ability to scapegoat. When your life is hard, the reason for it isn't because you got 10 people owning 90% of the resources and 90% of the wealth. That's not why you don't have money because that guy has all the money. Yeah. You don't have money because of some immigrant who doesn't have any money either.
Because the Haitians ate your cats and dogs.
Exactly. And so it becomes a means of deflecting people from, because ordinarily, if one guy's sitting there with all the food and everybody else is hungry, they would turn and look at the guy with all the food and say, "Yo, that's not going to work." But if that guy with all the food is to say, "Hey, man, the reason you don't have any of this food isn't because I have it all; it's because that other guy, that other hungry guy, he's standing on your land, and so that's why you don't have food." It's much easier, again, population control. So, I mean, I think that it necessitates the ability to distract people, to get people looking at the wrong thing and so forth.
Yeah.
When you do concentrate all of the wealth and all of the spoils of a society into such a small number of people, and that happens based on the mechanics and the structure that are in place in that society. Are there mechanics and structure that tend to spread out success, or are there that allow success to build on success and become concentrated? So, I mean, I think we're at the front end of
definitely.
something.
I just want you to be clear.
Let's get out of here. So last point.
Yeah, no, it's really for you because you've mentioned a couple of times population control. And just for the audience, I want you to be clarified. I'm assuming you're not meaning that they're trying to control the numbers of people in a population, like trying to bring us down from 8 billion to 2 billion. Like that's what I want to make sure, because you said it a couple of times. So
okay, yeah, I'm talking about controlling the minds of a threshold of people, so that you can either prevent people from acting in their own interests, or you can make people act in your interests. And so that's what I mean. So yeah, I'm glad you clarified.
It was important to clear that up.
Yeah. So, but I think we can wrap this topic from there. Check out part 2 as well, and we'll talk to you soon.